Welcome back to Totally Pointless, everyone. This deep dive is a little closer to home for us than usual.
Oh,
Yeah, we're recording this right here in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and, well, we're feeling pretty fired up about a legal challenge that's happening right in our backyard.
it's a fascinating case, no doubt about it.
It is. Two Nova Scotians are taking the Prime Minister to court
Hmm.
over his decision to prorogue Parliament.
Yeah.
And for us, this isn't just some abstract legal debate. We've been out there on the front lines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, standing with the freedom fighters, seeing our bank accounts frozen for supporting the convoy, hold the line for Axe the Tax. We've seen firsthand how important it is to hold our leaders accountable. So yeah, we're pretty invested in seeing some justice done. Before we jump in, though, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps us get the word out. Okay, so two regular Nova Scotians are taking on the Prime Minister in court. They're saying his decision to prorogue Parliament was, well, let's
Wow.
just say questionable.
Now, to understand what's at stake here, we need to clarify what prorogation actually means. Essentially, it's a temporary suspension of Parliament. Think of it like hitting the pause button on all parliamentary activities.
Right, a total timeout for the government. And what's really wild is, this is the first time in Canadian history that citizens have directly challenged a Prime Minister's advice to the Governor General about prorogation. We're talking about a pretty big legal precedent.
It's definitely a unique case, and it forces us to look back at the history of prorogation, which is actually rooted in the royal prerogative. We're talking way back to the days of kings and queens.
So it's like this ancient power that's suddenly being dragged into the 21st century and put under the microscope.
Exactly, and it raises important questions about how much power the prime minister actually has in a modern democracy.
And speaking of powerful prime ministers, our Nova Scotian heroes are arguing that Trudeau's move is straight out of Boris Johnson's playbook. Remember that whole Brexit showdown in the UK a few years back?
Yes. The infamous prorogation of 2019. Johnson attempted to use prorogation to essentially silence Parliament and avoid scrutiny during a very sensitive time in the Brexit negotiations.
He was trying to pull a fast one. But the UK Supreme Court wasn't having it. They ruled against him, saying prorogation cannot be used to frustrate or prevent Parliament from doing its job.
That's a key point. Parliament's job is to hold the government accountable, and prorogation, when used improperly, can interfere with that crucial function.
And that's exactly what the Nova Scotians are saying. Trudeau is trying to dodge accountability and avoid tough questions. And the timing of this whole thing is a little suspicious, right?
Yeah.
11 weeks right before the U.S. presidential inauguration. It's like he's trying to slip something past us while everyone's distracted.
The Nova Scotians have laid out three main arguments in their case. First, they claim this prorogation is an undemocratic attempt to reset Parliament and avoid scrutiny. Second, they argue that the 11-week time frame is far too long. For a simple reset,
It's like pressing pause on your video game just when things are getting tough and taking an 11-week break. Not exactly fair play.
and their final argument focuses on the reason given for the prorogation: to facilitate a Liberal Party leadership race. They're saying that's not a justifiable reason to use such a significant constitutional power.
It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, or in this case, using a major constitutional power for a little internal party housekeeping. Not a good look, Trudeau. Not a good look.
It raises questions about whether personal political motivations should ever factor into using such a powerful parliamentary tool.
Absolutely. And all of this ties back to that UK case we mentioned earlier. Remember the UK Supreme Court said prorogation can't be used to stop Parliament from holding the government accountable. And the Nova Scotians are saying Trudeau's doing exactly that.
The parallels are definitely there, and if the Nova Scotians win this case, the consequences could be huge. Parliament might be forced to resume sitting immediately.
Can you imagine that? Parliament, back in session, ready to throw down. What do you think they would do first? A vote of no confidence, emergency hearings on the situation down south? Who knows? But it would definitely shake things up.
It would certainly inject a lot of energy into the political landscape, but beyond the immediate drama, this case could have long-term implications for how prorogation is used in Canada.
It's like this case is forcing us to take a hard look at prorogation and decide what its limits should be.
Precisely. It's a debate about the very foundation of our democracy and the balance of power between the Prime Minister and Parliament.
And for us regular folks, it's a chance to see how this legal drama plays out and what it means for the future of our country.
It's a reminder that the law is constantly evolving and adapting to new challenges.
And sometimes it takes ordinary people with the courage to stand up and say, hey, this isn't right, to push for that change.
This case is a testament to that very idea, the power of citizens, to challenge those in authority and demand accountability.
And it all started right here, in our beautiful province of Nova Scotia. Who knew we had such legal firebrands in our midst?
It just goes to show that you never know where the spark for change will come from.
Okay, but let's get back to the nitty-gritty of the legal arguments for a minute. To win this case, the lawyers for the Nova Scotians have to prove that Trudeau's reasons for prorogation were, well, completely bogus.
It's not exactly bogus, but they have to demonstrate that his reasons weren't reasonably justifiable. Essentially, they need to convince the court that the Prime Minister abused his power.
So it's not enough for Trudeau to just say, oh, I needed a break. He has to show that there was a real, legitimate reason to shut down Parliament, one that aligns with the principles of responsible government.
Exactly. And those reasons will be under intense scrutiny by the court.
What kind of evidence will they be looking at? Secret government memos, late-night texts? What's going to do with the smoking gun here?
Well, it's unlikely to be that dramatic. They'll likely rely on public statements made by the Prime Minister and other government officials, expert testimony on constitutional conventions, and past instances of prorogation.
So it's like a legal puzzle, piecing together all these different bits of information to see if Trudeau's actions were truly justified.
And the outcome is far from certain. It's a complex case. That touches on some fundamental questions about our system of government.
The suspense is killing me. Okay, let's say the Nova Scotians pull off a win. What happens then? Does Parliament just magically reappear?
Not quite magic, but the court could issue an order declaring the prorogation unlawful, which would force Parliament to resume immediately.
And then the fireworks begin. I can already picture the opposition parties lining up to grill the Prime Minister.
It would undoubtedly create a very politically charged atmosphere.
Oh, I can just imagine the headlines. Parliament roars back to life. Trudeau faces the music. Nova Scotians save democracy. Okay, maybe I'm getting a little carried away, but you have to admit it would be exciting.
It would certainly be a historic moment.
And for us regular folks, it's a front row seat to a major legal battle that could reshape the future of our country.
It underscores the importance of citizen action and the role of the courts in upholding democratic principles.
It's like David versus Goliath. But in this case, David's got a pretty solid legal team. A whole lot of people cheering them on, regardless of the outcome. This case has already sparked an important conversation about prorogation and how it should be used in a modern democracy.
Absolutely. It's forcing us to ask some tough questions about how our government works and how we can prevent abuses of power.
And for us here in Cape Breton, it's a reminder that even small voices can make a big difference when they stand up for what's right.
That's a goal worth striving for.
Well said. This whole thing has me thinking about the bigger picture. Like, what happens if Parliament does come back swinging? What should their priorities be?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that every Canadian should be thinking about. If Parliament resumes, what actions would demonstrate responsible leadership and address the most pressing issues facing our nation?
Whoa, that's a heavy question. But you're right, it's not enough to just hope the system works. We need to think about what we want it to achieve.
Exactly. If this case forces Parliament back into session, it will be a dramatic moment. And it will be up to our elected officials to rise to the occasion and show that they are truly listening to the concerns of the people.
Okay, so let's brainstorm for a minute. If you were sitting in Parliament right now, what issues would you push to the top of the agenda?
Well, given the timing of this prorogation, right before the U.S. presidential inauguration, I think there would be a strong argument for holding immediate hearings on the situation in the U.S. and its potential impact on Canada. After all, the Prime Minister's decision to prorogue Parliament meant that our elected representatives were unable to debate and respond to those developments in real time.
That's a great point. It's like we were on autopilot. While our closest ally was going through a major political upheaval, Parliament should absolutely be involved in those discussions.
I also think there would be pressure to address the economic fallout of the pandemic. Many Canadians are struggling, and Parliament needs to provide clear plans for recovery and support.
Absolutely. We need action, not just empty promises. And speaking of accountability, what about holding the government's feet to the fire? On their pandemic response, there have been a lot of questions about transparency in decision-making.
I think there would be strong public support. For a full inquiry into the government's handling of the pandemic, Canadians deserve answers about what worked, what didn't, and how we can be better prepared for future crises.
And let's not forget about the climate crisis. That's an issue that demands urgent attention. Parliament needs to be actively debating and implementing policies to address climate change.
You're hitting all the right notes. These are the kinds of conversations that should be happening in a functioning democracy. And that's ultimately what this case is all about, ensuring that Parliament can do its job and hold the government accountable to the people.
So, dear listener, that's where we leave you today. We've unpacked this historic legal challenge, explored its fascinating historical roots, and even dared to imagine the potential fallout.
But now the ball is in your court, so to speak. What do you think Parliament should prioritize if they are forced back into session? What issues demand immediate attention? Head over to our comments section and let's keep this conversation going.
Your voice matters. Your insights are valuable, and who knows, maybe your idea will be the one that sparks real change. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Canadian democracy. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.